I would just like to start and just like an overall introduction to this meetup and this event today. Thanks very much, Nicola, for joining in today and yeah, teaching us like a little bit more about Microsoft Fabric, what it like actually is, and what we can like do with it, like all this new exciting features and information that is like coming there. As you might have noticed, we are recording this meetup today, and it will like also be published publicly on our YouTube channel. If you are not fine with that, based on any kind of regulations or personal preferences, we are kind of asking you to mute yourself, turn off your camera, or if you don't want to be in any kind be included, we kindly ask you to leave the meeting and watch the recording instead. Otherwise, thanks for staying with us, and you can like find here also the link with like some older presentations and meetups where you can like get all the kind of latest information there. Also, like just a basic introduction, like we are the Power Platform User Group from Cologne in Germany. If you have like anything you need like assistance with, or if you have like any questions, you can like kindly contact Philip Lenz or myself, Marvin Bangert. We are like the owners and the leaders of this user group. So if there's like anything, feel free to get in contact with us. Philip is not here today due to his vacation, but yeah, if there's like anything, also you can like reach out to me. Otherwise, if you have like any kind of feedback for us, either maybe you want to speak by yourself, leading like a meetup, or if you have any other ideas or stuff that you maybe want to also provide it to us anonymously, you can use this QR code or these Microsoft Forms to just like fill out a quick form and send it to us so that we can like get some help from you in all kind of related things. Otherwise, if you didn't reach out to us, I got this link from somewhere else. We have a meetup group where you can get like all the kind of latest informations, what we are doing in this meetup. As we are in Germany, we often have like also German meetups, but we also often have like English meetups as today, where everything is like held in English. Also, as you already know, there's like the YouTube link. If you didn't notice yet, I'm using PowerPoint Live. So all kind of links you can see here right now in this presentation is like clickable, and you can just like save it for later. Also, all kind of other content like PDF or stuff that is like sent to us from all the different presenters, you can like find here on the our SharePoint site, where we are just like publishing all kind of contents and everything that is like not video, as this is like published to YouTube then. Then just to give you like a quick overview, what is like next for the end of the year currently, what is like publicly announced from us is our monthly Power Platform What's New, which is held in German language. But of course, you are like welcome to join there. We are just like meeting up with the community and just like talking about the latest updates and news within the Microsoft Power Platform. And then there are like two conferences and bigger sessions planned. So once there's like the Microsoft Ignite, if you didn't heard about yet, it is like one of Microsoft's biggest events held like in Seattle and also hybrid. So you can also join from your couch or from your working desk to watch most of the sessions there. And the registration is like already open, so you can like get registered. And also like from the 17th to the 18th of November, there's a German Power Ton Dach conference where we are talking like about all kind of Power Platform related topics. That will also be in a hybrid conference, so you can like also join online, or you can also drive to the nearest city for you, and maybe also meet up with a couple of people there in person if you like. And that's like already it for like the introduction. Nicola, you already know that. We also are like taking care of the climate and trying to like give our a little bit back to the environment with these meetups, and also like as a little present for you. Thanks very much for being here today talking about Microsoft Fabric, and as a little gift we are like sponsoring a tree for you. It's I guess in northern Germany, so whenever you are maybe in north in Itzehoe, maybe you can like actually visit your tree there and see how it is like growing.
That's amazing. Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks very much. If you like, you can start with your presentation right now.
Sure. Let me just quickly share my screen. Okay. Can you see it? Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can see your presentation.
Okay, amazing. Then, thanks, Marvin, for this nice introduction. First of all, thank you and Philip for inviting me to present for Power BI User Group Köln. It's my pleasure always to join you guys, and thanks to everyone who joined this session. This is the first time I'm doing this session, and since Fabric develops so rapidly, I would say on a daily level, I hope that Microsoft didn't change anything since yesterday when I finished my slides and the old presentation. But I think we can slowly start. Just a short introduction, few sentences about myself. My name is Nikola. I'm originally from Belgrade in Serbia, but I live in a beautiful city of Salzburg in Austria for the last almost 8 years, where I work as an independent data platform consultant and trainer. Living in Salzburg was the reason why I've chosen this nickname Data Mozart. I guess you all know that Salzburg is worldly famous as a birthplace of this great composer. So I was brave enough to use his last name as part of my nickname, and that's why I'm trying to make some music from the data. Other than that, multiple year experience working with predominantly Microsoft data platform products, starting with SQL Server, then whole BI stack, integration services, reporting services, analysis services, and since 2017 working with Power BI. Nowadays, almost all my work is related to Power BI and tabular modeling. That's about me. Before we start, very important disclaimer that I want you to keep in mind. Microsoft Fabric, as of today, is still in public preview. And that's important from many different perspectives. The first and most important one, if you watch recording of this session in a few months, you might think what this guy talked about. Because the product is changing. Many features are not there. Many features are not working as expected. That's I would say that's normal because it's still in public preview. So not all features of Fabric are available at this moment, or some are available at a certain extent, but we will see they are changing over time, and probably in the next few months those features will also evolve. That's one thing. The second thing is, because Microsoft Fabric is still in public preview, it's not production ready, period. So I just talked to Marvin before we started the meeting. At this moment, it's very useful to learn about Fabric because this is the huge thing that is coming. And you can use it for some proof of concepts, for some development stuff and so on. But I want you to be aware that it's not production ready, which is obvious because it's still in public preview. Sincerely, we hope that it comes generally available in a few months, or maybe even before that. And then this slide can go to history. But please keep in mind that everything we cover in this session, it's just still related to Microsoft Fabric as a product that is in public preview. So first, let's start with a high-level overview of what is a Microsoft Fabric. And I want to start with an analogy. I guess you recognize the football pitch on your screen. And because I'm a huge football fan, in football team you have like players, many different players with various characteristics, and those players play in different positions. They have different sets of skills. For example, you have very fast players who can play on wings and utilize their speed to create chances for their team. Then you have strong and tireless players who can excel in defense. Then, of course, you need a good goalkeeper to protect your team from the opponent's attacks. Finally, you also have players who are skilled to score goals. Now, imagine yourself being a coach of that team. So you have all these players at your disposal, and your task is to establish the system that best fits your players, with winning the match as the ultimate goal. So we can think of a Fabric, or at least I like to think of Fabric as a data football team. So Microsoft provides you, Microsoft provides you with the players, and your task as a coach of this data football team is to integrate those players into the system that will ensure success. These players, some of these players are already well known. For example, Azure Data Factory. So I call those players season stars. You can think of them, of those players as season stars. So Azure Data Factory, Azure Synapse Analytics, Power BI, of course, but there are also some fresh faces, some newcomers that should bring fresh blood to your experienced team. And we will talk also about those fresh players in this session. At this moment, it's just important to understand that Microsoft Fabric is not some new fancy tool. It's basically a suite of individual analytic tools and services that work in synergy to provide a unified analytics experience. Now, we are not physically in the same room, but probably some of you are now wondering, wait, wasn't Azure Synapse Analytics labeled as a solution to provide a unified analytics experience 2 years ago? Yes, you are right. So we now have another unified analytics solution, which is Microsoft Fabric, that unifies one of the previous unified solutions, which is Azure Synapse Analytics. Sounds a little bit confusing, but don't blame me, blame Microsoft for this, but we'll come later to explain how Synapse now fits into this big picture of Microsoft Fabric. So what does this unified, when you say unified experience, mean in the context of Microsoft Fabric? We are talking about the unified experience. So whether you look at the single workspace experience, single sign-on experience, single storage format, all the way to single experience for managing security and collaboration. So we already talked about players in Microsoft Fabric, and this is a high-level overview of our data team that exists and that plays under Microsoft Fabric umbrella. You might rightly assume that some players simply changed their shirts, but their skill set and their strengths remain the same. So if we talk about those players, you'll see how they are split in those two. So storage layer, which is one lake, and we will come very soon to explain why this one lake thing is super important from Fabric perspective, and all those services and tools that are part of Fabric, how they play together to create this unified experience. So the fair question now before we proceed is Microsoft Fabric just a rebranding or of some existing Microsoft data offering, or is it completely new thing? So the truth is somewhere in between. To some extent, yes, Fabric is just rebranding of certain services and tools, but there are also many new features and capabilities that are really brand new and promising. So that is the unification from the service level perspective. From the professional level perspective, we can talk about unification from the perspective of different types of people in the data world, or Microsoft calls them data personas. So remember when we were talking about different players within our team. So you may have professionals coming from traditional relational databases background, then data engineers, data scientists, data analysts. All these personas, the idea is that they can all leverage this unified Fabric experience to play to their strengths. In short, this is how Microsoft Fabric end-to-end scenario looks like. At the very bottom, we have this one lake, which is the central storage repository for all your Fabric workloads. Again, we will talk about one lake in more detail now. Please now, at this moment, keep in mind that one lake is the central repository storage, and there is only one single one lake per tenant. So you can't have more than one lake per tenant. That's important to keep in mind. All the files that are stored in one lake to be consumed with different computing engines are stored in Delta format. We will also explain what is Delta format, of course, from high-level perspective, and why it is a huge decision by Microsoft to leverage Delta for everything, basically, in Fabric. So at the very bottom, we have this layer, storage layer, which is one lake. Then this middle layer is refers to different compute engines that exist in Fabric. Keep in mind that Fabric as a thing is sold as software as a service. That means you don't need to provision anything. So you don't need to care about how many data warehouse units you have to scale up, scale down, and so on. So everything is done serverless. So there are 4 different engines that currently exist within Fabric. And those 4 different engines are Spark, which is relevant for Lakehouse, then SQL, of course, T-SQL, which is relevant for warehouse workloads. Then we also have Custo or KQL language for real-time analytics, telemetry data, and so on. And we also now have Power BI analysis services engine that can read directly data from one lake. We will come later to explain this fairly new feature and fairly new thing in Fabric. Keep in mind that at this moment, there are 4 different engines that you can use to consume basically data and to write data back into one lake. And then on the top, we have those different services and different experiences that exist in Microsoft Fabric. Data Factory, I assume you are already familiar. This is a well-known service from Azure. It's being used to ingest the data into Fabric. Then we have 4 different experiences related to data engineering, data warehousing, data science, and real-time analytics. As I mentioned, real-time analytics is specifically related to Custo and KQL workloads. And for data consumption, we have 2 different services, Power BI, well-known Power BI, and Data Activator that was officially announced last week or 2 weeks ago. Very interesting and promising service. I still didn't have time to play with it, but it promises a lot in terms of how you can leverage data from different sources to produce some actions based on the data that you are receiving. So those are 3 main, if we split in vertical and horizontal terms, the overall Microsoft Fabric platform. In horizontal way, we have one lake as a storage. We have 4 different engines for computing, and we have different experiences to essentially as a top layer of Microsoft Fabric. Vertically, we have ingest like regular stages that we are used to know for decades in traditional data warehousing workloads, ingestion, data preparation, and data consumption. Now, this was a high-level overview, and I wouldn't spend time talking about Azure Synapse Analytics, about Power BI. I will mention them here and there, but I want to focus on what is, in my opinion, in my opinion, key pillars of Microsoft Fabric. So what makes Microsoft Fabric like something that you might want to implement in your data workloads. So first, everything as a service. So simply said, it just works. You don't need to care about the hardware, about the infrastructure, or some complex administration tasks. So by taking advantage of instant provisioning and straightforward onboarding, your focus can be shifted to data analysis itself and ensuring that business can quickly get results. In this scenario, integration and optimization happen automatically. So this is software as a service. Centralized administration. This means the idea is to govern just one tenant, which contains that one tenant contains all organizational data artifacts. That's what I mentioned when I talked about one lake. Everything resides within one lake. So various data professionals across your organization don't need to worry about compliance or security challenges, permissions, and so on, because everything is handled at one single central location. Lake. Data lake, as you will see, is at the core and center of Microsoft Fabric. And since we were talking about the unified experience, how would that experience work without the unified lake, or one lake, if you prefer that name? So pillar number one of Microsoft Fabric is one lake. Do you know what is OneDrive? Of course you do, we all know. So think of one lake as OneDrive for all your organizational data artifacts. Now think of all the different analytic engines that exist in Microsoft Fabric. We already mentioned them. SQL engine, Spark engine, real-time analytics, Power BI, and all the different applications that are reliant on accessing the data in the most efficient way, meaning reducing data duplication and data movement across different services, which was the case before one lake. Additionally, think of all the different personas in your organization, providing business insight from the raw data to have like a final analytics. That's a team effort, which requires collaboration between various data professionals. And enabling all these professionals and teams to work synchronously is one of the key advantages of one lake. If I need to explain one lake to a 5-year-old, I would say it's just a logical layer, logical structure of files and folders. Looks like File Explorer in Windows. That may point to disparate data sources. So your data might be coming from, let's say, ADLS Gen 2, but also from other vendors such as Amazon or Google, for example. You just create a shortcut to this data source, and basically it behaves same as it is the part of one lake. From the end user's perspective, they are just navigating through files and folders in one lake. As I said, that's a logical layer between the data source and the final destination, which can be, for example, Power BI report. From a conceptual point of view, we are talking about data mesh architecture. So every single department in your organization is responsible for taking care of their data, managing their data as a product. However, since we are talking about unified experience in Fabric, it's still easy to bring the data, mesh it up, and get together across the entire organization if necessary. Pillar number 2 is Delta file format. As I already said, Microsoft made a very bold decision to use Delta for everything in Microsoft Fabric. Now, before we explain what is a Delta file format, I need to share with you some additional information. Basically, Delta format is just an extension of Parquet file format. So I like to think about it as Parquet format on steroids. I will explain why. But some of the characteristics of Parquet and consequentially Delta file format and why it is considered today as de facto standard for storing data, especially when we are talking about data lakes. First of all, data compression. by applying various encoding and compression techniques, Parquet file provides reduced memory consumption compared to other formats like CSV, for example. Then it's a columnar storage. This is of paramount importance in analytic workloads, where fast data read operation is the key requirement. But more on that a little bit later. Also, Parquet and Delta are language agnostic. This means the developer may use different programming languages to manipulate the data in Parquet or Delta files, like Python, Scala, SQL, R, and so on. Then also what is important is that it is an open source format, which means you are not locked with a specific vendor. Basically, when you have data stored in Delta format, you can use whatever way of whatever tool that can read Delta files. And finally, support for complex data types also helps for speeding up analytical workloads. Now, the fair question, I was talking about Parquet. Can it be better than this? So can we have something that is better than Parquet? And yes, that's exactly what the Delta Lake format is. So to put it in plain English, Delta Lake is nothing else, as I said, but Parquet format on steroids. When I say steroids, I mean versioning of Parquet files. So it also stores transaction log to enable keeping the track of all changes that that have been applied to the Parquet to this Parquet file. And this is also known as ACID compliant transactions. So that's the main benefit of Delta format over Parquet. Essentially, it's technically it's Parquet with some additional features on top of it. Since it supports not only ACID transactions, but also supports time traveling, so rollbacks, audit trails, stuff like that, and data manipulation language statements, for example, insert, update, deletes. You won't be wrong if you think of Delta Lake as a data warehouse on the data lake. Obviously, we don't have time, and it's out of the scope of this session to examine pros and cons of the lake house concept. But if you're curious to go deeper into this, I suggest you read one of the many articles on Databricks site on this topic, because they were godfathers of the lake house concept. Pillar number 3 is a lake house, and let me explain why. Lake house is the architecture of choice in Microsoft Fabric. Before I explain why is that like this way, just a short digression. Nowadays, there is an ongoing debate in the analytics world: data lakehouse versus data warehouse. It's like Power BI versus Tableau, and yeah, many similar comparisons. Now, obviously, explaining pros and cons of each of these concepts is again out of the scope of this session, and I don't want to provide the answer which one is better of these two. But we are examining Microsoft Fabric, so we'll stick with the facts. And the fact is that the lake house is the architecture of choice in Fabric. And although Microsoft makes a distinction between the lake house and warehouse analytic scenarios in Fabric, in my opinion, this separation just can introduce some confusion. Let me explain why. So in all modern cloud data warehouses, we have a separation between the storage and compute layers. So if we are talking about the storage, when we talk about data lakehouse, data is stored as files in the lake in ACID compliant Delta Lake format. So that's data lakehouse. Data is stored as files in the data lake. And then you choose between different engines to process this data, process those files. When I say process, I mean read or write data into these files. And these different engines, when we talk about Fabric, are Spark and Polaris. Polaris is the engine that is behind serverless SQL pool in Azure Synapse Analytics. So Microsoft transferred this engine into Fabric, and Polaris engine is responsible for all your warehouse workloads in Fabric. So if we agree that there is a separation between the storage and processing layers, in Microsoft Fabric, storage layer is lake. To be more precise, one lake, which we already examined. So don't be confused, don't be baffled when you hear someone talking about data warehousing in Microsoft Fabric. It's still lake in the background as a storage layer, but the engine, this Polaris engine, which we already, as I said, know from serverless SQL pool, and data manipulation are SQL flavored. But data is still stored in Delta format in one lake. So same for Lakehouse, same for warehouse. It's just a different engine. Let's spend now a few minutes just to understand the Lakehouse concept in more depth, because it is of paramount importance for understanding Microsoft Fabric in general. Lakehouse is just a concept for storing the data, similar to having a data warehouse as a concept for storing the data, and then we have various data modeling implementation options such as relational or dimensional data warehouse, data vault, and so on. The same applies to data lakehouse. It's just a concept. Therefore, we need to examine how to design the data model for this lakehouse architecture. The most common pattern that you will see everywhere nowadays for modeling the data in the lakehouse is called medallion architecture. I love this name, it's easy to remember, but why medallion? The same as for the lakehouse concept, credits for being pioneers and giving those names goes to Databricks. They were first to come up with this concept of data lakehouse. Simply said, medallion architecture assumes that your data within the lakehouse will be organized in 3 different layers: bronze, silver, and gold. That's why it's called medallion. And now you may also hear terms such as raw, validated, enriched, which I personally prefer, to be honest, or raw, validated, curated, and so on. So there are different namings for the same thing. But essentially, the idea is every time the idea is the same: to have different logical layers of data in the lakehouse that are of different quality and serve different purposes. So this is not like physically separating. I have one lake for this, one lake for bronze, one lake for silver, one lake for gold. No, these are just logical layers within the data lakehouse. So let's quickly examine all these 3 layers. First, we'll talk about bronze layer. That is where we'll land the data from external sources in its original raw state. So data is ingested as is, containing only metadata in addition. The main purpose of the bronze layer is to serve as a repository of the historical archive of source data, and enable quick data reprocessing when necessary without the need to connect again to a bunch of external sources each and every time. It's important to keep in mind that the bronze layer contains unvalidated data. In regards to storage format, bronze layer usually stores the data in either Parquet or Delta format. Then we have silver or validated layer. Here, data from the bronze layer is conformed, cleaned, so that all the key business entities, concepts, and transactions are available in the form of so-called enterprise view, either for ad hoc analysis, machine learning workloads, and so on. In this layer, data is already enriched and validated, and it can be trusted downstream for further analytical workloads. From a data modeling perspective, silver layer is usually built like third normal form from relational databases. And in the silver layer, again, data is stored either preferably in Delta, but can also be stored in Parquet format. And finally, we have gold or enriched or curated layer that represents this icing on the cake. So data is structured and organized to support specific project requirements. Because this is the final stage in the overall process, you need to additionally refine and clean the data. and you will also apply some business logic, business rules, use case specific calculations, and so on. From the data modeling perspective, the gold layer is usually implemented through a Kimball style star schema. And that's why we use gold layer for infusing data in our Power BI reports. In terms of storage, similar to previous cases, Delta format is preferable, but also sometimes you will find data stored in Parquet files. Once again, don't be confused. Delta Lake is nothing else but the data warehouse on the data lake. Don't be confused hearing lakehouse, warehouse, and other things. But we will come very soon to explain those different houses in Fabric. If you're coming from, so we were talking about the lake house concept in previous part. Now, if you're coming from SQL background, you're probably wondering, how can I leverage my SQL skills and get the most out of Fabric? So if you're a SQL guy, you need to be familiar with two different concepts that exist in Microsoft Fabric. First one, if we talk about the lake house, each lake house, when you create a lake house in Microsoft Fabric, comes with a SQL endpoint provision. And you can use then this SQL endpoint to query the data from data lake house. Because it's just a SQL endpoint, you can only read data. You cannot write data into data lakehouse by using T-SQL. For that, you need to use Spark, so Python or whatever language the Spark engine supports. Important thing to keep in mind here is that this SQL endpoint is automatically generated for you once you provision the data lakehouse. Again, supports only read operations, but also some other database objects like views, inline table value functions, and store procedures. And you can also manage permissions by using T-SQL. So you don't have the full T-SQL surface area available, but for reading purposes, most of them are supported. And then you have another possible item to use in Microsoft Fabric as a SQL person. That's a Synapse Data Warehouse. Microsoft officially called it Synapse Data Warehouse just to be able to differentiate between the lakehouse and warehouse. So you will also hear terms like Fabric Data Warehouse or just a warehouse, but the official name is Synapse Data Warehouse. Here, basically, you have full transactional support, so you can use T-SQL both for reading and writing data into a Synapse Data Warehouse. So all DDL and DML commands are supported, and you can think of it as traditional SQL Server like type of workloads where you can use basically not 100% the same things as in SQL Server, but more or less, let's say 98% of things are supported. Now, when we are talking about those two different artifacts, SQL endpoint for the lakehouse and Synapse Data Warehouse, I like to use this illustration from Christopher Monod. I think maybe not here, but on the next slide, I included a link to a GitHub repository where Christopher created a lot of very useful and nice looking illustrations that you can use to better understand essentials of Fabric. So this is just like a short overview of the things that we covered in the previous slide. It's only that I wanted to share with you this resource that is very, very useful. Now, the fair question, and something that I hear very, very often nowadays from my clients, and that you will probably hear or you will probably ask yourself, do I need a warehouse or lakehouse in Microsoft Fabric? That's a fair question, and there is no single correct answer. So it depends. That's the only correct answer, like usual. Again, Christopher provided this short overview based on Microsoft official documentation. So depending on your workloads, but I would say this decision is mostly based on the skills of data professionals within your team. So if you have like a team of 10, 15, 20 people that are proficient with SQL, they are seasoned SQL professionals, your obvious choice would be to go with warehouse. You don't force them to learn now Python or some other language. You go with warehouse. On the other hand, if you have a lot of colleagues that are proficient with Python, and there are many of new kids coming from colleges learning Python, they're super proficient with Python. If your team consists mostly of them, then Lakehouse is obvious choice. So I would say Lakehouse versus warehouse mostly will depend, not at this moment, I will explain why, but more in the future when we get like the feature parity between Lakehouse and warehouse in Fabric, it mostly will depend on the skill set of your team. One disclaimer, why I said in the future and not now, certain features are currently not supported for the warehouse, namely direct lake storage mode, which we will examine in the next part of the session. It's currently not supported with warehouse. So let's assume that you are now starting with Microsoft Fabric implementation in your company, and direct lake is something that you did a POC and you identify that direct lake is something that you want to leverage with Fabric implementation. And as of today, you can't use data warehouse in Microsoft Fabric for direct lake. There are rumors that it will be supported in the future, but at this moment, it's just supported for the lakehouse. So that can be also something to consider. Also, if you have a lot of queries that are targeting multiple tables, so multi-table transactions, then warehouse is your choice, because lakehouses don't support that, and I think they will not support it. Anyway, you can use both. That's, let's say, combining best of both worlds. In real life, for example, you may want to use a lakehouse for bronze layer, and then you can build, for example, your silver and gold layer within the warehouse. Still, you can combine and you can write cross database queries. So you can, within one query, you can take data from both lakehouse and warehouse. And I think that, yeah, after some time, when people get familiar with all the pros and cons of both artifacts of lakehouse and warehouse, I think that most of them will use, to a certain extent, both of them. Maybe somewhere more of lakehouse, somewhere more of warehouse, depending on this skill set that I mentioned. But in the end, I think that it will be a combination of both. And don't forget, in the background, it's all Delta format. So it's just the different engine that reads and writes the data. Essentially, the format in the background is always the same. And pillar number 4, I've intentionally left this one for closing part of the session, because I think this one is really a revolutionary feature. And I will explain why. Not just because I work mostly with Power BI, but I think this one will bring a huge benefit, not for everyone. Don't get me wrong, it's not for everyone. It's not for every single use case and every single scenario. But for certain use cases where we struggle and implemented different workarounds, I think that direct lake can solve these challenges in way more convenient and elegant way. And that's why I think that it's really a revolutionary feature. So there are certain prerequisites that you must fulfill before you can use direct lake for Power BI. First of all, you need to use you need to have either Power BI premium license, so we are talking about the P licenses, or F licenses, which are relevant for Fabric capacity. We will talk about licensing in the next section, but for using direct lake, you need to have Power BI Premium or Fabric license. So it's not going to work for premium per user or for share capacities. It will not work. Then, as of today, you need to have provisioned a lakehouse. So it will not work on the warehouse, as I said previously. And you need to have this SQL endpoint provisioned for the lakehouse. SQL endpoint as a SQL endpoint is not a crucial thing for Direct Lake itself, but it's important because what happens if Direct Lake storage mode cannot work is that Power BI will automatically fall back to direct query storage mode, which we already know, which already exists in Power BI. And for this direct query fallback, it's important to have SQL endpoint so that those queries can be translated to SQL and then executed as direct query. Tables must be in Delta format, so Parquet is not supported. CSV and other formats obviously not supported, so everything must be in Delta. And there is a thing called V-ordering. I put a small asterisk here because I want to explain. This is not a prerequisite per se, but what happens, V-ordering is basically the optimization technique that Microsoft applies on top of your Delta file format. So when you have Delta table, for example, in Databricks, it's already optimized to a certain extent. And then Microsoft takes this Delta table and applies this so-called V-ordering, where data is sorted in a certain way to additionally improve the performance for these direct lake scenarios. So even if you don't have this V-ordering applied, direct lake will work, but performance may be worse than with this V-ordering thing applied. So this is technique of additionally optimizing Parquet files. And to illustrate how this direct lake thing works, so before Fabric, before Direct Lake, we are talking about two storage modes in Power BI. First one is import mode, where we basically take the tables from the original data source and we create copy of these tables within analysis services instance that Power BI uses to query the data, to run the DAX queries. So we import those tables and we basically we create a copy of these tables within analysis services. The main benefit of having architecture like this using import mode is obviously fast performance, because data is stored in RAM memory. That's fastest for reading. You have full DAX support and all the other things, but there are obvious downsides for this approach. And first is data duplication. Basically, you have data living in your, for example, SQL database, and then the same data living in this instance of analysis services that Power BI uses. And also data latency. Because we are basically creating a copy of the data, and we need to refresh this data from time to time. You never have like real-time data. You never have the latest data. Data always comes with some sort of latency. And we have direct query storage mode, where basically DAX queries are just being translated to SQL, and data is retrieved at the query time directly from the data source. This approach obviously has some solves some challenges that import mode introduced. Like we have real-time data, so whatever is in the database at the moment of query, you will get this data returned to Power BI. And there is no data duplication, so data will stay in the original data source before, after query execution. But there is a trade-off, and the trade-off is usually drastically slower performance compared to import mode. So both of these storage modes, import mode and direct query, comes with some benefits and some limitations, basically. And that's what Direct Lake tries to solve in Microsoft Fabric. So we already examined those two, import mode and direct query. Now we have Direct Lake, where essentially Power BI engine is capable of reading the data from Delta file format, same as it is stored it is stored in analysis services instance. That's a huge. Just wait for a moment and try to think about this. So Power BI now can read directly Delta format from the One Lake files, and this this basically solves all the limitations from the previous two storage modes. There is no data latency because whatever you have latest in your One Lake, Power BI will directly read from there and get the latest data. There is no data duplication, so data lives in One Lake, it stays in One Lake, and Power BI just reads through it. And because those files, those Delta tables are optimized by implementing this V-ordering and other compression and other sorting algorithms, it behaves and it provides the same or almost the same performance as import mode. So I can't tell you this is true or not, because from what I tested and what I read on internet, it's true. But let's wait for some real life use cases and see how it performs. So far from what I did tests that I performed, it's really like import mode, maybe 5% slower than import mode. But yeah, that's why I think that Direct Lake is really a revolutionary feature in Microsoft Fabric, especially if you are using Power BI as a tool of choice for reporting. And final thing to consider, and I think many of us, for many of us, this is crucial. How much will it cost to have this cool new unified end-to-end analytics solution from Microsoft? There are two ways of acquiring and using Microsoft Fabric. First is through Azure, where there is no commitment and you will be billed per second. So it's pay-as-you-go, typical pay-as-you-go concept. You see, here I pulled prices for West Europe region, but it's more or less the same everywhere. And keep in mind that this F64, this is the tipping point, the magic number 64, because there starting from this F64 license type and going above to 128, 256, and so on, Power BI users don't need paid license, so they can consume content with free license. So it's similar to premium, to P1. Now you see that it costs double the premium because this is pay as you go. In premium, you reserve the capacity, you pay in advance, you have a commitment, and so on. And that's what Microsoft will also offer for Fabric. We still don't have official public information about the price for monthly commitment. I assume it will be announced maybe at Ignite that Marvin mentioned, which is happening next month. But from what I've heard, and there are some rumors, that it will be approximately same as Power BI premium license. So if you have P1 and you're paying $5,000 per month, this one will be maybe 500 or 1,000 more, but it will definitely not be 10,000 like in pay as you go case. So this one with yearly commitment comes through M365 licensing, and as I said, starts from approximately 5,000. Don't keep my word. So we will see the official licensing, but it should be similar to Power BI premium licensing. And what is important once you arrange this license with Microsoft, you need to enable Fabric within Power BI tenant and capacity. So it's not something that you get out of the box. Maybe I can quickly show you. Okay, so you need to go to admin portal, and then you need to enable Microsoft Fabric here. If you don't enable it, your Power BI service will look exactly the same like previously, let alone icons and colors. They changed that, but you will not have a possibility to use Fabric if you don't explicitly enable it here within the admin portal. So this is for tenant, and also for you can also enable it for capacity. And maybe when we are here, just to spend a few more minutes talking about different experiences in Microsoft Fabric. So currently, those are the experiences that you can access: Power BI, Data Factory, and Data Activator. And under Synapse umbrella, Data Engineering, Data Science, Warehouse, and Custo, Real-Time Analytics. So currently, I'm in Power BI experience, and that looks very, very familiar if you're using Power BI currently. So basically, nothing changed here. But for example, if you go to Data Engineering, you have a possibility to create different types of artifacts like Lakehouse, notebooks, pipelines, and so on and so on. When we are talking about data ingestion, so now you have not just Azure Data Factory as one single choice. If you're coming from, let's say, background, non-IT background, and you don't want to write code to get your data into a lakehouse or warehouse, you can use Data Flows Gen 2, which basically relies on Power Query skills. So you can leverage your Power Query skills to bring your data, transform it, shape it, and bring it to a lakehouse. As I said, depending which experience you choose within the Fabric, you will have at your disposal different types of artifacts that you can create. Notebooks, experiments if you're working in data science field. Yeah, to be honest, I don't even know what's this, but yeah, if someone of you is data scientist, then you probably know what does this mean. But generally, this is the idea, and so the user interface looks pretty much the same from a regular Power BI user. It's just switching between different experiences then for bringing this unified experience to all the other personas within your organization. And with that being said, I think we are more or less at the end. Any questions?